I'm Manson Fleugel, a member of the Pembroke Area Naturalists, and today I'd like to talk a little bit about the birds of Lake Dore. There certainly are lots of them. I've spent a lot of time out there on the lake with my scope and binoculars, and there's lots of them there all year round, common ones during the summer and then during spring and fall migration, looking for sort of rarities that are going through, and sometimes you're lucky, most times you're not. You'll just find the common ones. But some of the birds I'd like to talk about today, probably one of the rarest birds I ever found in Lake Dore was a Pomeranian Jaeger. I found it in June, and it was about 10 years ago now, but the bird was in full adult plumage, and it should have been in the Arctic, high Arctic, on the ocean, the Arctic Ocean. And for some reason or other, it ended up on Lake Dore. And I was out checking for loons, and when this bird that looked a little bit like an osprey was flying by and it landed on the water, well, I had to check that out. And it turned out to be a Pomeranian Jaeger. Other birds that are a little more common that pass through every spring and fall are birds like long-tailed ducks. Beautiful duck when you're up close and personal, but most of the time on Lake Dore, they tend to favor the middle of the lake. So when the lake is 2 miles wide and 4 miles long, looking at them, you're generally looking at them from a mile to a mile and a half away, and with a telescope, you can identify them quite easily with the scope. When they dive, the tail feathers that stick out are about 6 or 8 inches long, and when they dive, that little tail feather sticks straight up in the air, and only for a second, and they dive, are down for a few minutes or a minute, and then they come back up. But there's usually small flocks of them in the lake, and especially every spring. May 24th long weekend is the best time to see them. Bald eagles, of course, are on the lake. You see them flying around. The odd time they do catch a fish. Last Christmas bird count, the Eganville Christmas bird count, it was very windy and there was sleet falling, and there was a big dark bird sitting out on the broken ice, and we checked it out a little closer, and it was an adult bald eagle that sat there, and I guess he was looking for a wayward rat or something like that, muskrat, and we didn't see if he found anything or not, but he did fly down the lake and land on an open patch again, and kind of nice to see them. They actually nest just off of Lake Dore on Shaw Pond, just going east of Lake Dore on the Bulger Road toward Douglas. And beautiful bird. They have young there every year, and quite easy able to see. We usually see them from about a mile away with our telescopes, but if you're lucky you can get closer than that, but we don't recommend it because we don't want to disturb the adults. Are probably known to be about 30 years, that they last about 30 years. Mm-hmm. And I think that's probably the reason, I'm not exactly sure of that, but I think that's probably the reason that there have been a real increase in bald eagles in the area. In the 50s and 60s and early 70s, well I guess 60s, the use of DDT was quite common, and that decimated the population of bald eagles and a lot of other birds. Mm-hmm. And when that quit being used or was banned, the bald eagle population came back. Some of the other birds that I really spent a lot of time looking for out in Lake Dore, and this is really fun with friends, is to take my boat, go out in the middle of Lake Dore, usually in August and September, and on a calm summer evening, and I did a lot of this with Chris, on a calm summer evening, going out and having a big bag of popcorn, not for us, but to try and attract the gulls in close, and throwing it over the back of the boat and just idling along. And of course the gulls see this as some kind of food that they love, and they'll come in, and we've often had 200, 300, 400 gulls wheeling and circling within a few feet of the back of the boat. So it's kind of neat to do that. Great blackback gulls sometimes show up on Lake Dore. They're as large as the herring, maybe a little bit larger than a herring, but they have a very black back, and quite easy to see. You don't see them very often, but quite easy to see. Then a couple of years ago, there was 3 of us out. Chris was along, and David Beimers was along, and we were out on the lake, and my motor quit. And so I started rowing back to shore. I would have had a mile and a half at least to row back to shore, and it was not going easy. And all at once, Chris, obviously he was looking all the time up above the boat, all at once he yelled, "Sabine gull." And well, of course, that's a very unusual bird. That would have been only the second time we'd ever seen it on the lake. And so all three of us got good looks at the sabines before I started rowing again. I said to Chris, it was Chris's mother's birthday. She had been gone a few years, but it was her birthday. And he said, "Mom probably sent us that." And so I said, "Well, could you ask her for a little gull?" Like being greedy, eh? And I said, "Could you ask her for a little gull?" And so anyway, we went around the lake and we come back, and we were coming back to shore to where we had put the boat in. And guess what flew alongside the boat was a little gull. First time I'd ever seen one in Lake Dore.
Wow.
And the sabines was the second time that I'd ever seen it. So it was a wonderful, that evening was just so wonderful. Lots of gulls. There's lots of different ones as well. I found a ivory gull there one year, late fall, just before freeze up. The bird was on right near shore. Found a black-headed gull out there one time, a number of years ago in the summer. But there are so many other gulls other than just the herring and the ring-billed. The ring-billed are the most common out there. Another bird you're going to see on Lake Dore a lot is an osprey. They're a fish hawk, of course, and the west end of the lake where all of the reeds are is excellent for shallow water and lingering pike or bass just under the surface. And you will see the osprey go flying along above, quite high up, and he'll sometimes sort of hover and then drop partway down, and I guess what he's doing is getting a bead on that fish that he sees underwater, and then he will drop feet first and into the water and come up with a fish. And the interesting thing about osprey is that when they still hang on to their fish, and usually they've had their fish like this, but as they fly off, they will turn their fish like this, so that it's flying straight with them, less wind resistance. And you'll see them flying across to wherever their nest is, taking back to home. Lots of ducks that go through in the spring and fall. I'll just mention one or two. Bufflehead is one that's very easy to see from shore in the fall and in the spring, particularly in the spring, because then you've got the males that have come back from a little further south, and they are just beautiful. The white on the back of their head is just so beautiful. The white on their back is so beautiful. And they're just tiny little things, and they're swimming, and they're trying to attract a mate. The females are dark with a little white patch here, not a big white patch, but a little one, right beside the beak and near the eye. And so easy to identify, and tons of them going through in the spring and fall. It's amazing. When they start to come in, there'll be a bunch of them. They stay for maybe 3 weeks, and suddenly there's none until fall again. But they're really taking up on food in Lake Dore, because there's lots of minnows and things that they can eat. So Lake Dore is an interesting place to be. I love being out there. I've spent a lot of time out there. There are all kinds of other, you never know what you're going to find. It's a rarity on the lake. And of course that's what we're looking for. But even to find the common bufflehead, the osprey, many other ducks and so on that are on the lake, it's an exciting place to bird.